What if I told you that one country's history was shaped by coups, revolutions, and global superpowers fighting behind the scenes? Iran is not just a country, it is a battlefield of politics, oil, religion, and world power. From kings supported by Western countries, to a revolution that changed everything, and a nation that still stands in the middle of global conflict today. This is the untold story of Iran, and how everything changed forever. Iran is still fighting. It is burning in the fire of America and Israel, and it has been fighting for 2 weeks without directly attacking America and Israel. Although US President Donald Trump says that they will destroy it in the blink of an eye, and even though he tells us that it has disappeared from the sea and land, Iran is still fighting. In fact, if a war starts, it will not only be limited, but it will spread and destroy the Middle East with missiles. Although Trump says that there is nothing left to attack from now on, he is giving a warning to American citizens living in Saudi Arabia and neighboring countries to leave without delay. Iran is not backing down. Although it is impossible to say what the future holds, it seems that Iran is still fighting despite the pressure from Americans and Israelis, who have huge and powerful armies. The Iranian people, who are said to have come out into the streets and defended their rights after being deprived of power, have chosen to watch in silence. Iran has a history of resisting its oppressors and standing up for its freedom and rights. Iran has a history of independence that spans more than 2,500 years. Although it has been invaded by various empires, it has never surrendered. Since Alexander the Great, Arabs, Turks, and Mongols have invaded it. Although they controlled it for certain periods of time, they adopted its culture and submitted to the laws and order of the Persians. They themselves became Persianized, but they did not make it a subject state. While many of its neighbors became European subjects in the 19th century, Iran did not cease to be independent under the Qajar monarchy, which lasted for 2 centuries. Iran is home to a diverse population of ethnicities and sects, with the majority being 50% to 60% Persians, who are Shia Muslims, while the remaining 20% to 40% includes Azeris, Arabs, and Kurds, many of whom follow the Sunni faith. Iran, the world's 4th largest oil producer, also controls the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 20% of the world's oil trade passes. Since the start of the current war, it has warned that any ship carrying oil through that route could be attacked. The United States, which has been sending its warships around the world, is not paying for what it has spent, and the problem is spreading to other countries as the price and distribution of oil have been disrupted. Iran's growth and civilization began to accelerate after Brigadier General Reza Pahlavi took power at the end of World War I in the early 20th century. Brigadier General Reza Pahlavi came to power not through inheritance, but through a coup d'état. After him, only a few leaders have held power in the past century. Various writers cite Reza Shah Pahlavi as the origin of Iran's modern growth and civilization. He is said to have made successful efforts to promote the strength of the state and social progress of his time. Reza Shah Pahlavi ended the Qajar dynasty, which had ruled Iran for 2 centuries, and established the Pahlavi dynasty, but his reign as king did not last beyond his son's lifetime. King Reza Shah Pahlavi, who overthrew Ahmad Shah Qajar in a coup and ruled, rose from a line officer in the Persian Cossack brigade to the rank of brigadier general. His bravery in the various battles he fought gave him the courage to challenge the monarchy. At the time of Pahlavi's rise to power, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk in Turkey and Adolf Hitler in Germany were in power. Mustafa Kemal's reformist approach, which brought Turkey from the destruction it suffered in World War I to modernization and development, became a strong example for the Pahlavi dynasty. Therefore, he moved to lead Iran with a policy that he believed was the best way to reduce religious influence and bring the country to the level of modern civilization. First, he decided to change the name Persia to Iran, which the people would accept. He also informed foreign governments that the country would henceforth be known as Iran, and they should use that name. He started work to build a railway line, which Iran did not have. Roads were expanded, health centers were opened across the country, and schools were built that focused on modern education rather than religious teaching. Some religious schools were also restricted or closed. Like the Turks, the separation of state and religion became law. They abolished the authority of tribal leaders and reduced the role of religious leaders in government structures and social laws. It was said that women should not be forced to cover their hair or wear the hijab, but that it should be their own choice. King Pahlavi's 20 years of rule were a time when Iran made great progress in military and infrastructure development. However, the outbreak of World War II, before he had achieved his goals, brought a difficult test to the work of Reza Shah. King Pahlavi's decision to remain neutral in the war, rather than side with any power, aroused the suspicions of the Allied powers. He refused the Soviet Union and the British request to allow their troops to travel through Iran by train, citing his neutrality. Adolf Hitler is known to have said that the Aryans in the East were Iranians, just as he claimed that Germans were the best of the Aryans. Since he had a good relationship with King Reza Shah, he sent him a photo of himself as a souvenir. The British, who feared that Iran might join forces with Germany because of its oil wealth, decided to take military action. Soviet and British troops invaded Iran and used the railways and roads that he had built for development. They took control of the country and forced the king to abdicate and hand over power to his son. When his 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, took the throne, the British exiled his father, Reza Shah, first to Mauritius and then to South Africa. 2 years later, he died in South Africa and was later buried in Egypt. The father and son, who had held the throne, remained separated and never saw each other again. Until the end of World War II, the young King Mohammad Reza remained the king of Iran under British influence, mostly as a figurehead. After the end of World War II, the constitution was amended to allow a popularly elected prime minister to lead the government, making the king a symbol of the crown and a guardian of unity. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who inherited the throne from his father at the age of 21, was not prepared to lead a country as large as Iran during wartime. When the British told him that if his father chose to leave, his son would succeed him to the throne, the young Mohammed is said to have disagreed. It is written that he cried and said to his father, "Take me with you." Until the end of the war, the Iranian monarchy was influenced by the British, not led independently by the young King Mohammed who inherited the throne. However, as Mohammed continued to hold power and his advisors encouraged him, he strengthened his authority. By limiting the power of the prime minister, which had been newly established, he increased his own power and ruled in what he believed were the interests of Iran. It is said that he did not agree with Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, who was known for serving the interests of Iran. In particular, the king did not want to accept the prime minister's request to bring the Ministry of Defense under the control of the cabinet. Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh is remembered in Iran's history as a leader of self-reliance and national independence. After the Iranian constitution was amended, the prime minister was elected by the people, and the king was given limited power as a symbol of Iranian unity and history. Previous prime ministers did not fully use the powers granted by the constitution. The king's authority to give orders and act in many areas remained respected, but Mossadegh, unlike his predecessors, decided to exercise the power granted to him. One of his first actions was to return the oil resources, which were under the control of British companies and not benefiting the Iranian people, back to Iran. Although he understood the problems that could arise from challenging British control at the time, he was determined to face them. British companies, after extracting Iranian oil, kept most of the profits and exported the products to the West. But Mossadegh decided to completely cut off British influence. This decision caused a major conflict. Britain, which had long influenced Iranian leadership, was angered by Prime Minister Mossadegh's decision and took the issue to an international court. However, Mossadegh argued that the dispute was with the companies, not directly with the British government. At the same time, plans began to remove the prime minister from power. Although American companies were also involved in Iranian oil, they paid their agreed share, so Mossadegh's decision was mainly directed at British interests. However, the situation later gained the attention of the United States as well. Britain blocked Iran from trading with its warships. Iran's economy collapsed. Britain mobilized the king's supporters to rise up against Mossadegh's government. A propaganda campaign was launched claiming that Mossadegh was a communist sympathizer, which was intended to make the Iranian people, who were deeply committed to Islam and their faith, doubt him. The American CIA also coordinated with military officers to remove Mossadegh from power. The supporters they organized marched in public to demand that Mossadegh be removed from power. Mossadegh and his supporters sought support from Shia Muslim religious leaders who had a large following. The Shia population accepted the call of their spiritual leaders and marched in support of him. The military officers, shaken by the public demonstrations, temporarily retreated from their plan, and Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh became the winner for the time being. But Britain and the United States did not stop, and the CIA directly participated in the opposition. They allocated large amounts of money and organized a military coup in Iran with the help of agents. They bribed military commanders and spread messages that communists were taking control with the help of the Soviet Union. They also influenced international media and local newspapers to work against Mossadegh. Reports later showed that foreign media, including the BBC, played a role in shaping public opinion against Mossadegh. Local newspapers wrote accusations against Mossadegh and his government, claiming corruption. Mossadegh's government was weakened by protests, unrest, and economic collapse. He also had disagreements with some Shia religious leaders who had helped him stay in power. These religious leaders showed their ability to influence politics. Ayatollah Khomeini asked for greater religious representation in the government and influence in the cabinet. However, the prime minister, although supported by Shia groups, did not allow religion and politics to. He said that Iran would remain a country where different religions lived in harmony, but religion would not control the government. This position created more tension, and the situation became favorable for foreign intervention. CIA agent Kermit Roosevelt Jr. helped plan the coup together with military leaders, preparing to replace the prime minister with a new government. Demonstrations broke out in support of the king and against the prime minister, and the government was asked to approve General Zahedi as prime minister to give legal backing to the coup. King Mohammad Reza Shah did not want to rush into a coup, so he left the country for a vacation and went to Rome, where the CIA continued its operations. The BBC reported that the coup had begun at 6 a.m., following messages influenced by CIA operations in Iran, aiming to shape public opinion and influence the king's position. The BBC also reported that the coup had been successful and that Iranian oil would again be exported to the West. At that time, some media outlets were accused of acting beyond professional ethics and aligning with political interests, influencing events from within while presenting information in a persuasive way. The Americans were influencing the situation from inside while also using communication to convince leaders and the public. When Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh went to the United States to resolve the issue, he was warmly welcomed and believed his concerns were heard. However, after seeing later actions, he expressed that the Americans could not be trusted. Mossadegh was forced from power by the military. Armed soldiers attacked his house. It is said that Mossadegh often worked while wearing night clothes and even received guests while sitting on his bed. So, when soldiers sent by General Zahedi attacked his house, his aides told him to leave, but he refused and said, "If not, then change the bed for me." The next day, Mossadegh was arrested and brought to court. When asked about his actions, he said, "My only crime was cutting off the hands of the British." He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. After serving his sentence, he was placed under house arrest, where he later died. America, which promotes democracy and a free press, was involved in removing a government that had allowed such freedoms. It has often been argued that its actions sometimes contradict its stated principles, especially when its interests are involved. There have also been claims of involvement in the removal of leaders in other countries, such as Patrice Lumumba in Congo and Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso. Now, President Donald Trump has openly expressed that national interest comes first, even when discussing leadership and political systems in other countries. Donald Trump said that he does not care whether the Iranian leader is a friend of America and Israel. America and Britain removed the elected Mohammad Mossadegh and replaced him with a king who claimed to control everything. For years, the United States itself was restricted from freely operating on Iranian soil. During his 30-year reign, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi built modern infrastructure, but it also allowed foreign powers to benefit from Iran's oil wealth. However, many believed that Iran was not benefiting enough from its vast oil resources and that much of the benefit went to foreign countries, including the United States. The king, who was considered one of the richest men in the world, was criticized while many of his people remained poor. The life of luxury in the palace of Tehran, where the king and his court lived surrounded by gold and jewels, was in strong contrast to the hardships faced by the Iranian people. Opposition groups accused the monarch of being obsessed with excessive power and material wealth. Communists, Shia Muslims, and other groups opposed the monarchy. The royal government, supported by the Americans and British, tried to suppress the opposition by arresting and isolating them through the security apparatus, which was known for its brutality. They arrested Shia Muslim religious leaders who were accused of extremism and who organized opposition movements. Shia Muslim religious leaders increasingly became opponents of the royal government after the fall of Mossadegh and as the king strengthened his power. When the king dealt with Shia spiritual leaders such as Ayatollah Khomeini, disagreements grew, especially over the separation of religion and politics. The disagreement later developed into stronger opposition. The idea grew that an Islamic state should be established in Iran. When Ayatollah Khomeini died, his influence declined, but later figures such as Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini continued the movement. The movement to turn Iran into an Islamic state led to the repeated arrest and exile of Ruhollah Khomeini. The government of Mohammad Reza Shah faced increasing criticism and did not resolve the situation peacefully. His luxurious lifestyle created public anger, especially during the preparations to celebrate the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire, which became one of the most extravagant events in history. The event took place near the ancient city of Persepolis, outside Tehran, in a desert area specially prepared for the celebration. Measures were taken to control the environment, including clearing the area and preparing the land. For invited leaders, luxury tents decorated with silk were built, along with roads and facilities. Large amounts of resources were used, tons of food, thousands of bottles of alcohol, and many supplies were prepared. To maintain security, about 6,000 soldiers were deployed. University students suspected of organizing protests were arrested, and universities were temporarily closed. Most of the supplies were imported from France, using trucks and airplanes, and the total cost was estimated in the hundreds of millions of US dollars. At that time, this amount was extremely large compared to Iran's economy. Leaders from many countries, both from the Western and Eastern blocs during the Cold War, were invited. About 60-plus kings, presidents, and leaders attended, including monarchs, presidents, princes, and prime ministers, all following royal protocol. Television stations and film professionals were present, along with print, radio, and newspaper media, which covered and listened to the speeches. The three-day celebration ended with King Mohammad Reza Pahlavi entertaining and welcoming the guests. But for the king, the event marked one of the first signs of failure. Loud voices were heard saying that the king, who was spending large amounts of money on celebrations, did not care about the people and should be removed. In addition, he created a favorable environment for reforms known as the White Revolution. The landowners were outraged by the reforms, which included women's suffrage, divorce rights, and greater participation in education and work. The fact that women, who made up about half of the Iranian population, were allowed greater participation in society, including education and work opportunities, angered some conservative Shia Muslim leaders. They accused the king of imposing Western culture and destroying Iranian identity. In particular, conservative Shia Muslims, influenced by Ayatollah Khomeini, supported the movement they had begun under the slogan of justice and change. People who demanded justice and reform increasingly joined the movement, and women also took to the streets to protest. Ayatollah Khomeini's messages, sent from exile in France, were recorded and secretly distributed in Iran. Police and security forces used force to suppress demonstrations, and arrests and executions became more frequent. However, the streets were filled with protests, and some soldiers and officials who had been loyal to the king eventually joined the people against him. As a result, the king left Iran with his family for medical reasons. When King Mohammad Reza Pahlavi arrived in Cairo, President Anwar Sadat welcomed him with a military salute and ceremony. When his stay ended, he requested treatment in the United States, but the United States was initially reluctant to allow it. The new Iranian government demanded his extradition, and tensions increased after he was admitted to the United States for medical treatment. Iranian forces later seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran and took diplomats hostage, demanding the king's return. The United States, concerned about the situation, refused to extradite him and instead moved him between countries. King Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was not allowed to remain in New York for his planned surgery and was later sent to Panama. Doctors in Panama attempted treatment, but it was unsuccessful, and his condition did not improve. Iranian officials later requested his extradition from Panama, but the Panamanian government refused due to concerns over the situation. Suffering from illness and political pressure, he left Panama and returned to Egypt to stay with President Sadat. Sadat was one of the few leaders who accepted him, and he remained there until his death. His illness lasted about a year, and he died in Cairo at the age of 60. His funeral was held in a mosque where his father was also buried. President Sadat attended and honored him with a military ceremony. Many world leaders did not attend the funeral. It is often said that when leaders fall from power, former supporters disappear. It is frequently observed that those who praised leaders during their rule are absent after their death or removal from power. The king's departure from Iran accelerated the return of Ayatollah Khomeini, who was in exile in Paris. Ayatollah Khomeini, who had been leading the movement to establish an Islamic State in Iran, returned to Tehran and was welcomed by a large crowd. An Islamic Republic was established. The United States and Israel were declared major adversaries. He immediately made decisions that shocked many women who had participated in protests under the slogan of justice and change. Women were required to wear the hijab, and restrictions were placed on their roles in education and public life, including government and legal positions. Movie theaters and bars were closed. Women filled the streets to protest these changes. On March 8, women protested in cities across Iran without covering their hair, but the protests did not achieve their goals. Security forces enforced strict measures, and public punishments were reported against some protesters. The United States imposed a full embargo, freezing billions of dollars in Iranian assets, including currency and gold. It also suspended the delivery of billions of dollars in military equipment and weapons agreements. The embargo continued for many years. The years of Ayatollah Khomeini's leadership were marked by the Iran-Iraq War and a period of intense pressure. At the same time, Iran became more militarily organized, and Islamic law was strongly enforced, while its oil resources remained central to the economy. Ayatollah Khomeini led the country until his death at the age of 87. His successor, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, continued his policies. He has remained in power for decades. Iran, after these changes, has maintained its military defenses while facing ongoing tensions with Western countries and regional conflicts. The Iranian people have often expressed opposition to the government, and many have faced arrest or punishment for protests. The absence of leadership transitions and internal uncertainty has also raised concerns among some observers. Iran's future remains uncertain, and its historical cycle of revolution and change continues to be widely discussed. Iran, after these changes, has maintained its military defenses while facing ongoing tensions with Western countries and regional conflicts. The Iranian people have often expressed opposition to the government, and many have faced arrest or punishment for protests. The absence of leadership transitions and internal uncertainty has also raised concerns among some observers. Iran's future remains uncertain, and its historical cycle of revolution and change continues to be widely discussed.